Welcome to The World Awaits.
Travel tales to inspire your wanderlust.
I'm Kirsty Bedford, journalist, editor and travel writer.
And I'm Belinda Jackson, author, travel journalist and columnist, and we're your weekly co-hosts. Hi there, welcome to our summer series, some of the best bits of the show from seasons 1 and 2 here at the World Awaits podcast. This week, we're going to Italy with the fabulous Australian-Italian author Maria Pasquale, who lives in Rome. Maria tells us how to eat like a Roman and, importantly, where to find the best gelato in the city. See maria-pasquale.com if you want to follow more. And our second interview is with another author, Nadia Plumridge, who divides her time between Perth and Florence, where she's working on the next run of her popular book, Lost in Florence. And she promises that Florence will steal your heart. And you can see more from Nadia at lostinflorence.ie. Maria, welcome to Travel Writers Radio. It's great to have you here from Rome this morning.
Thanks, Belle. Thanks so much for having me.
Now, congratulations on your absolutely beautiful book, The Eternal City, which is recipes and stories from Rome. You've lived in Rome for decades now. How long have you been in Rome?
You're right. It actually is decades, become plural. It's 12 years this year, so very hard to believe.
Congratulations. And do you still find, I mean, the book that I'm looking at the moment, The Eternal City, it's so comprehensive. You're talking about things like Jewish Roman cuisine, about the history of food in Rome. Does Rome still surprise you?
Oh, it does. The Romans say that it'd take a lifetime to uncover Rome, and only until you get to spend a lot of time here or live here do you really start to understand that. I mean, I travelled through Rome for over 20 years before I moved here. I've now lived here for 12, and there are some real obvious things as well. Like, I see a gallery or a really popular museum and I, have to embarrassingly kind of say, oh gosh, I haven't even been there. And, there's just always something to do in this city, which is why it makes it so wonderful.
And the food then, which is the focus of the book, you're uncovering layers of food from different ethnicities, different time zones as well, different moods, different approaches to food. It's absolutely mind-boggling the breadth of Rome's culinary traditions.
It is, and it's, and I guess that's, in a sense replicated across Italian cuisine, because there isn't this homogenous cuisine. It's so regional, and Italy was this set of kingdoms before it became unified about 150 years ago. So, not even from region to region, but from town to town. And like you said, those layers are what makes, Rome's cuisine about as exciting and dynamic as its history, because just like the city has a history of, it's built physically. You can see that there are so many layers in Rome, just in terms of its architecture, in terms of its monuments. And, the food reflects that.
So can you pin down, if I said to you, what's Roman cuisine, what would you tell me?
Oh, gosh. I mean, in a few words, I'd say it's, carbonara, artichokes and lamb. But, it's so much more. I mean, it has its foundation in, or history in the cucina povera, which means, peasants' cuisine, which I guess is based on, austerity and, no wastage. So, very simple but very good quality ingredients. You have the awesome foursome of the Roman pastas, which is the, cacio e pepe, amatriciana, the carbonara, and probably the one that hasn't, become a household name globally yet is la grisha, which is a carbonara without eggs or an amatriciana without tomato. So they're your main pasta dishes. But then you have, like I said, whatever's in season in a sense, but artichoke is probably, if I had to describe Rome in a word, you would, vegetable, or in a sense, it'd be the artichoke. Lamb, Roman-style pizza, which is very different to Neapolitan-style pizza. And then, that, like you said, that Roman Jewish cuisine, those dishes are outlined in the book. And the quinto quarto, which is the real Roman cuisine, and that's nose to tail or offal.
Oh, amazing. And as this, the recipes that you've got in the book, these absolutely beautiful recipes, how did you collect them? Are they, and can you eat from this, I can cook this at home, but if I went to Rome, could I find these dishes on the street?
You could. You can find many of the dishes that are in the book on the streets of Rome. They've been contributed by, street food outlets or from my local, restaurants and trattoria. one of Rome's most prominent bakeries, have given me their recipe for the maritozzo, which is a sweet, cream-filled bun, and also the pizza bianca, because as every region of Italy has its version of a flatbread. In Rome, it's pizza bianca, which is a salty, crispy and soft on the inside focaccia. So those sorts of dishes are the ones that you can cook for yourself at home and also try here when you're in the city. And then you have the stories, which is one of my other favourite components of the book, obviously, and it kind of tells a tale of these unsung food heroes, so the people that work at those bakeries or my local cheesemonger.
Oh, it sounds absolutely delicious. So there is so if you had to pick your favorite recipe out of this, which would you nominate? And that is a really big ask, because how many recipes are there in total here?
There's 70 recipes. Carbonara, I'd have to say, even though, look, I'm a sweet tooth, so I won't try and cheat and give you 2 recipes. I think, if I had to go for the most iconic recipe, for me, carbonara, I tell people if they haven't eaten a carbonara in Rome, you really haven't. And it's one of the most debated dishes in the city. And many Romans will tell you that the best one can be found in their home or at their mother's house or their grandmother's house, or, their neighbourhood trattoria, and everybody kind of argues about, how long you cook the guanciale for, whether it's 2 egg yolks or, whether you put a whole leg in. And generally it's made with guanciale, pecorino romano cheese and eggs, and that's it. And it doesn't have any cream in it or any onion or peas or mushroom, and there are no variations, and Romans are really particular about that. It is probably one of the most, the dishes that is most debated and causes an absolute uproar when anyone tries to play with it.
And by the sounds of it, one of the dishes that we have absolutely mangled to death here back in Australia. Well, I mean, did you find you grew up in Australia? Were you eating carbonara in your house and then you go out and you'd see what was being served outside? Did it just blow your mind? Was there such a disparity?
It did. There's a huge disparity. And I think that, so many people are surprised when they come to Italy. And, Rome is generally, even if it's, nowadays people have, got the good fortune of travelling back to Italy for their second and third times. But, if your first stop is generally Rome, it's the capital. And so that's your exposure into, Italian food. And people are often shocked to what they find, or, they're expecting something else. Things like, I often get asked about, garlic bread or, or other regional delicacies like, where can I get a good risotto in Rome? And I always, tell people, you can find a risotto, but you probably shouldn't eat it in Rome, because not that it's not going to be good, but it's not going to be the best risotto. I mean, those geographic and historical ties to food are for me, one of the most beautiful things about Italy. And I think that, if you're in Milan, eat Milanese food. If you're in Rome, eat Roman food where you can.
Oh, I love it. And you've actually given us your own little food lover's guide to Rome in the back. I mean, this is your black book, isn't it? This is the sort of stuff that you hide and you only pull it out when you're writing an article that you want to blow everybody's mind, or your secret place that you don't want to share. You've been very generous, actually. So.
I have. I haven't really left many more up my sleeve, but that's the great thing about living in and even Rome, this ancient city, but it's still this modern day bustling metropolis, and it has a wonderful food scene, and there are new openings all the time. And it's, as you would know, as a writer, it's also very hard to keep these lists evergreen. But it has, rooftop bars and where you can shop for food, where you can eat. It's got, like I said, the markets, the trattoria, the fine dining, and some of that innovative Roman cuisine, which are also some of my favourites.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the markets would just be, that would be something that would be more, almost eternal. Even some of these markets will have been running for many of them for generations as well. And the delis that you've got in there, the beautiful food stores. But then also, I love the fact that you can tell me where to go get gelato. Where would I get the best? Tell me, where is the best gelato in Rome?
Oh, the best gelato in Rome is in Trastevere, in my neighbourhood, and I'm not being biased. Most Roman gelato aficionados will tell you that Ottaleg is one of the best in the city, and it's easy to remember because it's gelato spelt backwards. And the owner of Ottaleg, Marco Radiccioni, is not just a gelato maker. I mean, he's, a gelato chef is what he's often described as here, because he plays with a number of ingredients that you wouldn't traditionally find in gelato. I mean, you'll go in there and you'll find all the classics like chocolate and hazelnut and all the seasonal fruit flavors, but, the raspberry has real raspberry in there, and, things like licorice or pear and gorgonzola, and these sorts of gelato combinations that, in a sense, have, kind of took off here in Rome as a result of the, you had this wave of gourmet gelato kick off because of the financial crisis. So it was actually giving to Romans, just for a few euro, some of those tastes that you would normally find in a restaurant. Whereas now you can just pop into a gelateria. Fata Morgana, which is now, it's not a chain, but they've expanded, and there are a number of those around the city. And that's also another great tip for gelato, with some classic flavours, but some of these, like I said, some of these gourmet flavours that are giving you a real experience.
So do you go back to them, or are you a classicist when you come to your gelato?
No, I like to try. I try and justify fruit, because I think that, if I'm having a raspberry gelato, it doesn't really count, if you know what I mean. I don't try and count calories by any stretch. Anyone that knows me knows I don't do that. But, you can't kind of live off gelato. And so if I'm feeling a bit guilty about it, I won't have a cream-based one. I'll have a fruit one, which is great, because in summer, at the moment, it's the warmer months here in Rome. And so the other day I had a great melon gelato and watermelon, and it's the options are endless, which is good.
And it seems like the options are endless in Rome itself. But this is a very tight little directory at the back of the book, which includes rooftop bars as well. So cocktails unfortunately do count as well.
Absolutely.
and beautiful custard filled donuts, and the recipes are there, and also the history of them as well, and some absolutely astonishing photography of Rome. I mean, you can't take a bad photo in Rome. I think that
this is true.
That is absolutely true.
She's very photogenic.
Is she forgiving? Can you walk it off? That's my question.
Oh, you can. Look, it's a great walking city. I think people will be surprised at how compact the historical centre is. It's a little sneaky in that it kind of gets you unawares. Like, you kind of feel like everything, that's the Pantheon. It's, only 5-minute walk to the Piazza Navona, and then it's only a 5-minute walk. But, by the end of the day, you've clocked up the steps, which is good. But it's a great walking city, and I think it's a wonderful city just to get lost in, because, there really are ancient relics and ruins at every turn, and you can, you really can't get lost in Rome. I mean, to use, very cliche, all roads lead to Rome, and they really do. When you're walking around the historical centre, you always feel that you're part of this important place, and there is history just kind of enveloping you everywhere.
And beside those historical sites is a fabulous little pizzeria that you just happen to have recommended, or somewhere to stop for a drink or a coffee. Maria,
that's right.
Congratulations on the release of The Eternal City, which was actually published, your publishers here in Melbourne, aren't they?
That's right, Smith Street Books.
Smith Street Books, fantastic. Gorgeous coffee table book, hardcover. And I am definitely, next time I'm in Rome, I'm going to do two things. I'm going to take a list of your recommendations, and I'm also going to call you up for a coffee as well. So
I'll be waiting, as I always say, for a gelato, carbonara, cocktail, or all of the above.
Fabulous. Okay. All right. Count me in. Thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you, Belle.
You're listening to The World Awaits. We'd love it if you could leave us a rating and a review on your favourite podcast platform.
Welcome along, Nadia.
Hi, Kirsty. How are you today?
So great to have you chatting with us today. So let's start by, tell us a bit about your background and how you got into travel.
Well, I guess I've always been a bit of an explorer from a very young age. I remember quite clearly being about 13 and watching lots of TV shows on the ABC about Europe and travel. And I was like, when I grow up, I'm going to go and live in Europe. So I was lucky enough when I was 15 to go on a family vacay, kind of doing the grand tour, back in the day for Aussies, where you go to London and then to Amsterdam and Paris and through Italy. And I happened to come through Italy particularly, and I was 15 years old. And I don't know if it's kind of serendipity or not, but I had my 15th birthday in the city of Florence. And I remember that day falling in love with the city and saying, one day I'm going to come back and live for a summer. So it all kind of stemmed from there. And then when I got a little bit older, I did move to London to go to university and study journalism. And travel's always just been a passion, people and places. So it felt very organic to, become a travel journalist. And here I am.
So when did you go back to Italy again after you were 15?
Yeah, so when I was living in London, it's so easy to travel. That's one of the joys of being based in the UK. It's 2 hours and you could be in Rome, or 1 hour in Paris. So I came over quite a few times, more like a long weekend. But the kind of turning point for me was I was working in London in a creative agency, and you sort of think about coming to an end of a job and the next step. And I thought, I don't want to get just into another job in the big city. right now. So I went back into my little sort of box of dreams, and there was two things left to do. And one was like going back to Florence to live those 3 months that I promised myself when I was 15. So I literally like quit my job, packed up my London house, and moved to Florence for not the summer. It was the autumn. It was like September, October, November, and that's kind of where it really, really started.
Wow, fantastic! I'm sure so many of us would love to do that. So, and you loved it so much, you ended up writing a book about it. So how much further down the track, did that come about?
Yeah, so that was in 2010 when I did the 3 months. And I went back to Australia for Christmas, which was kind of my annual pilgrimage back to the family in Perth. And then it was sort of there that they kind of like, I don't know what's the word, when it just was sort of in my kind of blood. I was like, I haven't finished with Florence. I need to go back. And so I eventually returned in 2012, and I took a full-time apartment in Santo Spirito, just near Oltrarno, which is the south side. And I kind of got into freelance writing and got really back into travel writing, because before that, when I was in London, I worked in media houses like Bauer and for creative agencies. So I basically went to Florence, and I didn't really have a big plan. All I knew in my kind of soul was like, I need to sort of be here now. So it was really exciting at the time, because although Florence is still a really magical place, I feel like 10 years ago it was slightly less touristic. And I had this amazing apartment in Old Palazzo on the Primo Piano, which is the first floor. And my living room was an old drawing room of an old palace. So if you imagine like 7-meter high ceilings with like a fresco, I turned it into like a kind of a sort of 19th century kind of salon drawing room with like long tables for dinners and a little writing desk in the corner. And that was kind of what life became. It was a bit like living in some kind of novel. And it was when I was living there, I had this idea, because I loved just walking and exploring. So I'd walk around the Oltrarno and I'd see all these amazing artisans. I'd pop my head in and say ciao and find out more about them. And I was so fascinated about these craftsmen, these people that were still making amazing like jewelry or clothing, or could be some sort of something for the house. And I was like, people don't get to see this. They all go to the three main squares, the Piazza, like for the Duomo or the main, Piazza Signoria. And no one's exploring these little back streets. And so the concept originally, I've always been a book lover, but I started a website in 2014 called Lost in Florence. And the idea of Lost in is going back down the back streets, get a little bit lost, and you'll discover the true essence of what a city is. And so that's where the website sort of started. And I put it into a couple of categories: wine, dine, fine. So basically eat, drink, and like shop. And the shopping part, though, is very much the artisans. Like it could be ceramics, it could be jewelry, but people that are handcrafting like beautiful products. And I'm very much into this sort of slow travel idea that I think's been around from years ago, but maybe coming back into the fore. So that's kind of where it started. And eventually, the website became quite popular organically. I didn't have a big plan, but I think other people resonated with the idea of wanting to be like explore and have a more authentic experience. And so I think, what year was it now? A couple of years ago anyway, I got in touch with a couple of publishers, and Hardy Grant, who are one of my favourite publishers in Australia and the world with lifestyle products and books, came back and loved my concept for the book. And so they gave me a book deal, and I wrote the book, which came out in 2019.
Fantastic. And we'll put a link in the show notes, because I know it's getting a reprint as well. So it's obviously very successful. So tell us, people who adore Italy and in particular want to go to Florence or return to Florence, what are some of the unique sort of finds that people might not know about?
That's a good question, because I think I love Italy so much, but I do see this sort of over-tourism element where people come and they kind of call it the TripAdvisor effect. People get on TripAdvisor and they see the top 5 things to do, and they all do the same thing. And sadly, that kind of takes away some of that kind of magic dust that does exist in the cities. So personally, I'm a huge walker. So I would say, for example, if you come to Florence, but one of my favorite things to do is go for an evening stroll or a nighttime stroll, where most of the tour groups have left, a bit more peaceful. And then also I would just try to find, some resources. My book is one that you could find. It's got like 150 venues that are more independently owned and off the beaten path. Also in Florence is an amazing English-speaking newspaper called The Florentine that has a lot of like events and new openings, so it's worth resourcing as well. For example, being here in Tuscany at the moment, and it's summertime, like they're doing amazing like films at the Bardini Gardens for €5, which are amazing. So you can go to this beautiful garden overlooking the city of Florence for €5, which is about $8 Australian. You can watch a film outside al fresco, which I think is gorgeous. And there's a lot of these kind of events that kind of do go on if you just do a bit more research, if that makes sense. But otherwise, I don't know, I'm really into the old sort of mama and papa sort of like trattoria in terms of eating, if that makes sense, like the old sort of style places that are not too stuffy or fancy. So I mean, look, I'm just trying to think where I was just eating recently. Like, for example, I love the area of San Frediano in Florence, which is in the Oltrarno, which is the south side, just a little bit to the west. It's lesser traveled, but it's about 10 minutes on foot and you can be at all the major landmarks. But in this area, one of my favorite restaurants is called Trattoria del Orto, which is just family run. Orto is like the garden. So basically it's like the restaurant of the garden, meaning all the vegetables and sort of locally grown. And you just get amazing pastas, a really good house wine there. And you can have an amazing meal for like 20 euros, which is about 30 Australian dollars, and come out feeling really happy and also just being more with the locals. So I guess my advice to anyone is always just, maybe if you see something like that looks really busy, don't necessarily go there. Just go down a few little back streets and pop your head into somewhere a little bit lesser traveled and you'll probably find something that no one else has discovered apart from the locals.
Amazing. And so are you doing more research while you're there now? And also, how have you found that it's changed this time around? Because you're obviously in Italy right now.
Yeah, I mean, the first question, so at the moment I'm updating my book because we're getting a new edition printed, which is fantastic. As you mentioned earlier, it's been a sellout. So I'm lucky enough to just be able to go through and double check that everything's still current or add some new venues in there as well. In terms of your second question, I mean, look, I've really seen the city evolve in the last 10 years or so. And even post sort of COVID, it's become a very popular place, even more so. Everyone I know works in the travel industry. They're all saying numbers are bumper, more than 2019. So everyone's sort of, I think, finally doing their bucket list Italy travels. But what that creates is a huge kind of number of people coming and doing a lot of the same things. So my advice to people is always do two things, really. I'm really into this idea of slow travel, which means don't just go to a place for a day, maybe stay for a night or two, where you can stay at a local sort of hotel and meet someone, maybe that's run by some interesting local people and putting your money back into that community. Have a few nights to stroll in the evening and go to some great little restaurants. And even if you stay at those boutique hotels, those people running it will know all their favorite places. They can give you all their intel. It's a really wonderful way to explore a city. And I'm also into, and I think what the future will be is maybe don't think, for example, in Italy, you have to do Venice and Florence and Rome. There's like towns like Lucca, which are an hour from Florence, just towards the coast, towards Pisa. It's a magical little city and it's so like pretty, and you'll have a much more kind of sort of, authentic or slow or less touristic experience staying in a city like that. It's not too far away from the main places, but at the same time isn't, as full, if that makes sense.
Yes. If you had only one day or say half a day and you were in Florence, what's something you would tell someone that you have to do besides going for that lovely evening?
Yeah. It's a really good question. I think it depends on what you want to do. Like, people come for the Uffizi and the Accademia, which is where the David statue is, and that's, very famed. And if you want to see those artistic treasures, I would say definitely book your tickets in advance, go early and get there, and see it. But what else would I want to do? I mean, there's galleries like Palazzo Strozzi I love. It's in a beautiful old palace, but it's more modern art, which I find quite interesting. They have different sort of exhibitions on the go. What else do I like? I don't know. Truffles are quite popular here in terms of Tuscany, and there's a beautiful place called Procacci, which is on Via Tornabuoni, which is one of the poshest streets of Florence. It's a bit like the Bond Street of Florence with all the, the Gucci's and the Pucci's and the Prada shops. But there you can go for a glass of Prosecco and have a little truffle sandwich in this kind of rather refined, little kind of wine bar. And something like that's quite fun if you like your food. And these days as well, in the summertime, they have even like boat rides down the Arno, and that's quite fun. So the River Arno is the river that cuts through the city from north to south. And in these sort of warmer months, you can take like a river cruise. It's like in a small boat, though. It's not like a large boat, down the river under the famous Ponte Vecchio Bridge. And that's a beautiful way to see the city and all its sort of iconic landmarks.
Wow. And it must be just a remarkable way to spend your time at the moment with the weather being so lovely. And I know that you said you're staying among vineyards.
Yes, I'm in Chianti at the moment. I'm about 30 minutes south of Florence at the moment, on the road between Strada and Greve in Chianti, which is a famous wine region. Probably a lot of people know red wine, but it's really beautiful. I mean, the great thing again about Florence is quite a small city. So literally within 15 minutes in a car, you are literally outside the city walls and you're in rolling hills with vineyards and little castles perched atop of hills and like lined with cypress trees. It's pretty picturesque, I have to say. I can think of worse places to wake up in the morning, So no, it's very beautiful. And I can see why people love Italy, want to keep coming back or at least come once in their lifetime. So I do encourage people to travel here. But like I said, my big thing is go slow, stay a few nights, maybe, stay at local, boutique hotels where you can put your money back into the economy. That's a great thing to do. And then also get the intel from the locals on where, to eat, drink and shop. And also get my book if you need a resource. I always recommend it. And then also go to some of the lesser traveled towns, which are so beautiful. I mean, even 2 weekends ago, I went on Sunday for a drive down to Siena, which is still quite a famous and popular town, but less than Florence. But it's so beautiful. It's got its main square dates back to the late 1200s, the 13th century. It's lots of cobbled streets and, beautiful churches and good shopping as well. And it was a beautiful Sunday. It was gorgeous. I got to skip around Siena on a Sunday just because, and that's something nice to do. And it definitely was not as, touristic as the city of Florence at the moment.
Yes.
So consider that as well, those lesser travel places.
I remember being there on a moped and going. Oh, it was incredible. It is such an for someone who's come from this part of the world too and hadn't been there before, it is a remarkable, historic, just stunningly beautiful part of the world. So we're going to wrap up now. So just tell us, what is the question we ask all of our guests is, what is the most bizarre situation you've found yourself in during your travels?
It's funny, actually, because I don't know, when I think back, everything seems just wonderful. Maybe it's my positive spirit. But when I think of that question, something I think about was about 15 years ago. I was traveling through Southeast Asia for 3 months, just backpacking with an old boyfriend. And we did Thailand and Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, which was fantastic. And this was again, back in the day when we were in Cambodia, where we would have a limit of $5 American a night to stay in accommodation. We got quite good stuff, actually, quite good commo. And we just did it where are we going tomorrow? Okay, let's get this bus. And this was before smartphones. So you had to read the Lonely Planet that you'd find in a cafe that someone had left behind and go to a travel agent in some sort of hut and say, where's the next bus to wherever. Anyway, I remember we went to Siem Reap and we went to see the Angkor Wat temples. And this was before you had to pay an entry fee and before there was any sort of gated kind of way to enter. It was pretty, that wasn't Wild West in a bad way, but it was open, basically. So the kind of thing back then is you basically get a local to be a private driver for the day for $10 American. And we got picked up at 5 a.m. in his little tuk-tuk, and he took us to the temples. And the main temple in Angkor Wat, which you'll know from most of the iconic photos, is very, very beautiful. So we got dropped off there at about 5:30 at this point. And you could just walk up and literally climb on it back then. And as the sun was coming up, we just explored. And there was something very magical about this whole experience of being in this sort of foreign Southeast Asian country, seeing the sunrise on these temples that date back, to 600s or 700s. And we turned a corner and went to a little area where we could see this group of people all dressed in white in a circle meditating, which was really, again, quite added to the magical spirit, I guess. So we kind of climbed down the stones and we just joined them and ended up basically seeing the sunrise at Angkor Wat with these bunch of random but lovely meditative people all dressed in white. And then after this finished, we just left and kept exploring and went to the other temples. And yeah, it was just amazing. And so I feel really lucky that I've always had a sense of adventure, but also had the luck to travel to a lot of places, especially before they were very touristic, and really sort of see them for what they were. I don't know, maybe in my past life I was an explorer in the 1800s or something. I do feel that sometimes, where do I get this sort of excitement just to see and do and travel? But it's in me, it's in my soul. I can't get rid of it. So
thanks so much for that, Nadia. And it's just been so great talking to you. And we'll put all the links to your book and your website on the show notes.
All right. Thanks. Lovely to speak with you. Have a great day.
That's a wrap for The World Awaits this week. Click to subscribe anywhere you listen to your favourite pods. And where can people find you, Kirsty?
I'm at Kirsty Writes on Instagram. That's KIRSTIE Writes, WRITES. And where can people find you, Belle?
You can find me at globalsalsa.com or on Insta at global_salsa. Thanks for joining us on this summer series of The World Awaits. See you next week.